All right. Great. So, first question would be, why have you decided to run?
So around a year ago, I confronted Rosa DeLauro in the streets of New Haven over her $500 million military package to Israel 5 days after the UN declared a stage 5 famine in Gaza. I recorded that interaction that got onto social media, and then I was approached about mounting a challenge against her. And at the time, I just kind of, since she was a Democrat, I kind of thought that she was on board with most of the things that I believed in with the
Yeah.
exception of Palestine. But then when I looked more into her record, I realized that there were a lot of things that she was not doing that I thought she would have been. First and foremost, I didn't realize that she was not supportive of Medicare for all, and that she would only go as far as a public option, which I don't think is good enough for our people and for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
There's also this program called the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. It's a federal program that is supposed to subsidize 40% of special education expenditures for towns and cities in the district. Right now, it's only funded enough around 13.3%. And there's a bill in Congress called the IDEA Fully Fund Act, and she was the
Yeah.
only congressional delegate in Connecticut to not co-sponsor that bill. I also felt that she wasn't using enough of her power in the Appropriations Committee to push for legislation that would reduce costs for student loans, for borrowers, and for housing projects that could help alleviate homelessness in our
Yeah.
district. And after reviewing her record, I realized that there was much more room to go on getting the resources that our people need, and that I felt that she wasn't doing enough. And so I decided to jump into the race and try and fight for some of these values that I believe in.
Nice. And what are your main priorities?
So first and foremost is Medicare for all. The Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders plan proposed earlier this year. The Lancet did a study that this program would save taxpayers $450 billion over a 10-year
Yeah.
period while guaranteeing health care coverage for every American. It would eliminate copays, deductibles, and premiums. And those deductibles, copays, and premiums are some of the biggest issues that people have with the affordability crisis. And so eliminating those would save people, t tens of thousands of dollars from
Yeah.
their paychecks. Second is the student loan crisis. I want to double the Pell Grants. I want to expand the eligibility requirements for those Pell Grants. But then I also want to retroactively reduce student loan interest to 1% in line with what the federal government gives our banking system. Because if we can afford to give our banks 1% on loans, we can afford to give our
Yeah.
students 1% interest on loans. And since this program would be retroactive, it would amount to almost canceling student loan debt for many people. Because right now, a lot of student borrowers are paying on the interest and not the principal. Most of them have already paid off
Yeah.
the principal, and they should not be burdened with these extravagantly high interest rates. Then I also do want to fully fund the IDEA program. That would bring around $53 million $51 million into the district each year, and that could help alleviate some of the property tax burden that people have been experiencing as property
Yeah.
taxes has risen to offset the cost of education. And then I do want housing guarantees because as the wealthiest nation in the world and one of the wealthiest states in the union, I don't believe that people should be experiencing homelessness and that they should be guaranteed a stable place to sleep, to eat, to have mental health services, to have job services, because homelessness is a vicious cycle that can't be broken with policing and current policy. We need a holistic approach to ensure that people are able to break out of the cycle of homelessness, be reintegrated back into society, and in
Yeah.
turn, they would have jobs that would then increase the tax base revenue. And then to pay for these programs, we need to be taxing billionaires and ultramillionaires at a progressive rate, similar to what we had during the JFK era, and also reducing the amount of war spending that we've been funding. So like last year, Rosa DeLauro voted in favor of $1 trillion war package that is now being used to decimate Iran and Venezuela and Cuba. And
Yeah.
so cutting off that money and using it here in our district so that people's material needs are being met.
Great. Let's go issue by issue if that's possible.
Mhm.
Um, can we go first with healthcare and the specifics on the issue?
Mhm. So a couple things about healthcare. First of all, Medicare is one of the most efficiently run programs. I believe only about 6%
Yeah,
of the cost is in administrative costs, and that is unheard of for most programs, whether that be public or private. And so we can reduce costs by streamlining the administration that has become overburdened and complicated as part of the private health insurance industry to extract profit off of sick people. So I believe, healthcare is a human right and that it should not be a for-profit market that denies people critical care in favor of CEO pay packages.
yeah,
Also, some people have mentioned the public option. I'm not for a public option because I believe that private health insurance companies would force higher risk individuals onto the public option to offset their costs and drive up their profit. And
yeah,
so I don't believe in a public option. And so the reason why I think a program like Medicare for All would work is if you have 320 million people pool their resources into healthcare, that is a much more efficient system than having these blocks of different providers with different groups of people.
yeah,
Right now, if we have, 320 million people on Medicare for all, the younger you are, the less health conditions you have, the less you're going to use healthcare. The older you are, the more health conditions you have, the more you're going to use healthcare. And so if we pool all of these resources together, the young and the healthy, they will offset the costs for our elders and for people who have medical conditions, and that will provide a stabilization effect that will allow a
yeah,
greater number of people to be able to access healthcare. And I know a lot of people will then say, "Oh, well, Andrew, what about what happens, in Canada where people die looking for care?" Let's look at some of the Nordic countries where they don't have that issue. And let's stop looking at the countries where there are failures. And instead of looking at failures and thinking that's the end all and be all, let us learn from these places and establish a system better than them. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that in American greatness, and if America wants to prove that they are great, let's show it by having well-funded, well-thought-out programs that benefit
yeah,
everyone and make everyone healthy. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times I do focus on some the moral aspect of arguments, but you can always focus also on the monetary aspect and how much money do we lose in economic productivity because people, wait to get medical care, and instead of getting preventative care, they have to get, care after they've become sick, and how much does the economy lose out on sick workers that could be, mitigated by having more preventative services and by having more services covered so that people don't have to choose between their rent, their food bills,
yeah.
and their health care.
Great. Let's move on to housing then.
Mhm. Okay, so for housing, so one thing, like a buzzword that I hear a lot of is affordable housing. And
Yeah,
even though it's affordable housing, it is still not affordable because I have met, so over the winter, I tried to volunteer at homeless shelters, and people would come in from their job. So they had a job and they were still homeless. So even
yeah,
though they were working full time, they still did not have enough money to have a home, which is ridiculous. So first and foremost, I want to see a quick solution for homeless people. And so one of the ideas that I had was a social housing or shared housing where when I went to college, we lived in dorms, and we each had our individual room with our beds, a desk, uh,
yeah,
um, a wardrobe, and then we had shared restrooms and showers, and we had a shared dining hall. I imagine constructing, whether it be through renovating retail space or finding, because I am cognizant of any new construction could have environmental impacts and urban congestion impacts. So we do need to,
yeah,
take those into consideration. But if we can retrofit buildings to provide these small, quick units that can provide cheap, quick housing that also comes with, dining halls, job service programs, internet cafes, mental health resources that can help rehabilitate people, have that, because, when you don't have a address and when you don't have a place to do laundry and you don't have clean clothes and you don't have internet access, it is hard to reintegrate back into the job market. And so
yeah,
we need to be creating opportunities that allow people the access to the resources that they need to successfully reintegrate back into the job market. Because at the end of the day, I believe that, an overwhelming majority of people, 99% of people want to do something meaningful with their lives. They just need to be given the opportunity to do so. Another thing that we can do for housing is blocking private equity from buying up single-family homes and apartment complexes, uh, and really decommodify the housing market and have housing that is owned and operated by the tenants, having more tenant unions,
Yeah,
having more democracy in apartment units, and making sure that for modest housing accommodations, they are not part of a profit market. If landlords want to make a profit off of housing, have it be luxury apartments. People who are well off that can afford these things but don't want a home and are not, into, because owning a home isn't for everyone. Some people do like living in an apartment situation or like in a condo. If you want profit for those, have those be luxury items. Do not have modest housing be for profit. We need to make sure that people are housed within their means, and we can even start putting, for public housing and affordable housing, have the rent be capped at a percentage of median income for the area for which that housing serves.
yeah. All right, great. What are your stances on the economy and job opportunities?
So I there aren't enough job opportunities. And one thing that I struggled
Yeah,
with coming out of college was somehow having to be young, but having all of the experience of someone who was older. And so, a lot of people, I've seen job postings where a master's is required and you only get 18, $20 an hour. And that is just incredible because of the amount of money that you have to invest in getting master's and certain
yeah,
education.
yeah,
And so I think one of the things that we need to look in is capping CEO pay and higher earner pay. So back in the 1950s, I think the average CEO would earn around 51 times what their lowest paid employee was paid. Today, that can be anywhere from 400 times to 700 times. And
yeah,
so I think we need to start looking into, we have a minimum wage. What if we started looking into a maximum wage? What if CEOs could only make 31 times their lowest paid employee? That way, if they want to be paid more, they have to make sure that their lowest paid employee is also being paid more. We need to democratize the workplace and make sure that corporations and businesses are not working to increase shareholder value. They're
yeah,
working to increase the value of the workers that actually generate that wealth. And so democratizing the workplace so that people have more say in what companies' decisions are made based off of the needs of the workers and their customers, not based off of the needs of the shareholders that make decisions behind closed doors.
yeah. All right. Let's move on to the environment and what kind of environmental protection policies do you support?
So I forget the name of the organization, but there's this plan called 30-30-30, ensuring protection of 30% of waterways, seas, and
Yeah,
land for free open space. I definitely think that is something that we need to pursue vigorously. I believe in Connecticut, we were only at 21%, and we're still like 156,000 acres short of reaching that 21% of open space. I would like to see that 30%. I think that we need to have a rapid decarbonization of our economy. We need to do that. No new fracking, no new oil. We need to rapidly be transitioning to renewable technologies such as solar, wind, and geothermal. I am not a proponent of nuclear fission power simply because the extraction of uranium can have detrimental effects on the local habitats. The thermal radiation from the nuclear power
yeah,
plants can have an effect on marine life. The spent nuclear fuel rods are, radioactive for 10,000 years and have to be disposed of
sure.
in very specific ways. And then, although it is rare, there is always the chance of catastrophic nuclear failure, which we've seen in Chernobyl and more recently Fukushima. And so I'm not a proponent of nuclear energy. I would like to see a lot more investment into nuclear fusion technology, which is a genuinely clean technology. Because right now, nuclear fission is just carbon free, but it is not pollution free.
Yeah.
And so I think there needs to be more incentives, if not regulations, for new construction to have, solar panels on their roofs, trying to mitigate any sort of, for solar panels, instead of having to have these burdensome, reorganization of your home electric grid, having more kind of like plug and play technologies where you can just easily plug in solar
Yeah.
panels, reduce the regulatory burden of, private homes that, can't afford that kind of infrastructure. But then also democratizing and decommodifying the energy sector. So right now in Connecticut, EverSource and United Illuminating have complete monopolization of the energy market. I think EverSource made $1.69 billion of profit last year, and energy prices just keep going up and up and up. And so
Yeah.
I would be in favor of breaking up these large utility companies and having more publicly owned energy companies that efficiently distribute that power and don't rely on the profit-driven motive, because a lot of times these costs go up because you have to account for the profit that these companies are trying to make.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to civil liberties then, and civil rights.
Mhm. First and foremost, I think we need to codify Roe v. Wade. A woman's rights to, women has a right to choose what they do with their own body, and that should be
Yeah.
in law. That should be written in law. It should not be up to nine bureaucratic judges deciding which rights people have. So full full abortion rights for women. Um, we'd also need to revisit the 13th Amendment of the Constitution and outlaw slavery outright. Most people think that slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. It was not. There is a clause that slavery can still be used as a punishment for crime, and it doesn't even say what the limitation of that crime is. So we need to
Yeah.
genuinely abolish slavery. We also need to be rethinking the for-profit prison system. Prisons is another system that I do not believe should have a profit-driven motive, because incarceration, first of all, should be the last resort for criminal issues. If we invested more into our communities, if we invested more into schools, after-school
Yeah.
programs,
Education. Yeah.
community centers, education, and making sure that people's basic needs are met, I think we've seen this in other countries where there is a reduction in crime because crime is usually consistent with where there's poverty. So we should be tackling
Yeah.
poverty, not incarcerating it. Um,
Yeah.
there also needs to be I think another way of tackling civil rights is by reforming the Supreme Court. We do need to expand the court. I think it will make sense to have 13 Supreme Court justices, because we have 13 circuit courts, and there's historically always been one Supreme Court justice for each of the circuit courts. So we should expand it to 13. There also needs to be a code of ethics that guides these Supreme Court justices. They should not be able to accept any sort of money or any sort of
Yeah.
bribes or any sort of favorite treatment, and all of that needs to be disclosed. There needs to be recusals for any court case that could personally affect them or anyone in their immediate circle. There should be term limits of a maximum of 18 years for Supreme Court justices. And I even think at some point we should be visiting the idea of not having Supreme Court justices appointed by the Senate, but having the jurisdictions of those 13 circuit courts elect a Supreme Court
Yeah.
justice that serves a certain term, to, insulate them from political pressure, but to not give them a lifetime appointment, to be able to dictate how people's lives are guided. Um, there also needs to be more federal protections for people in the LGBTQ plus community, especially our trans comrades. Because right
Yeah.
now we're seeing a lot of trans health being taken away from trans youth. And these, they are people. They deserve the same respect and rights as any other person, and they deserve access to the healthcare that they need in line with what their doctors say they need in order to live lives that respectable lives for themselves.
Yeah.
And there also, this can also, touch in on immigration. I think we need to be investing more in immigration judges. That way we can get asylum seekers and refugees, processed quicker, integrated into society, and have a pathway to citizenship, especially for people that have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
most times they pay more in taxes than our billionaires population does. There's a study by the Cato Institute, which is a right-leaning think tank that has shown that immigration and immigrants, I think, contribute. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they contribute more to the federal coffers than they take in benefits. And so these people deserve citizenship, which would also just, increase even more of a tax base because even though they might not pay certain federal taxes, they pay income taxes, they pay property taxes, they pay sales
Yeah.
taxes, and they pay a lot of their money in hard-earned cash into the system. And then we also need to be looking into the rights of sovereign nations. A lot of reservations are underfunded. There's a lot of drug and addiction. And there's a lot of Native women that become subject to sex trafficking and human trafficking. And we
Yeah.
need to be working more with indigenous tribes to ensure that they are getting the resources that they need on land that was stolen from them generations ago.
Great. Well, the last question would be about foreign policy and where do you stand on foreign policy, of course.
So unfortunately, I believe that America has become more of an imperial nation than a democratic one. And oftentimes our CIA and our military will intervene in the actions of sovereign nations, especially when it comes
Yeah.
to more socialist or even communist policies. I do not believe that we should be intervening in any other nation's sovereignty. These are sovereign nations, and if we believe in democracy, the best way of doing that is to lead by example, not to force it upon someone else, because that is in itself anti-democratic. Currently, we have around 800 military bases around the world. No other nation comes even close to that. And
Yeah.
so I would like to see the shutdown of these bases and have the areas that those bases are located in turned over to the sovereign nations, and those sovereign armies can, overtake those infrastructures if they so choose. I also believe that we have a tendency to invade foreign countries when natural resources become an obvious target. So in Venezuela, I believe that we attacked them for their oil reserves, same as we done in
Yeah.
Iraq and in the Western Asian nations. And then, of course, in the African nations, their diamonds, cobalt, and other natural resources. And so ensuring that we are not invading countries for natural resources, that we are working collaboratively with these countries so that they can retain the economic value of their resources while trading with the United States to meet our needs. But again, doing it in such a way that doesn't continuously produce mass genocides and massive amounts of forced labor
Yeah.
that end up with a lot of death and destruction of both um, those local environments and the people who, are subjected to these very inhumane conditions, again, to maintain the profit margins of American corporations.
Great. Where do you stand on the Palestine issue? That is something that I wanted to know.
So I have my Palestine flag here. I
Oh, I
believe,
didn't I
yep,
didn't see it.
I believe what is happening in Palestine is a genocide. It is ethnic cleansing, and I am in support of a one-state solution of Palestine where Jewish people, Christians, and
Yeah.
Muslims have equal rights under the law, because I do not believe that a two-state solution is compatible with peace in the region. Because, first of all, the Israeli government has historically undermined a two-state solution. And right now we're seeing that even though Israel has their sovereignty, they still disrespect the sovereignty of Syria and of Iran and of
Yeah,
Lebanon. And so I believe that that Israel has been used by the United States to maintain a foothold to maintain a military foothold in the West
yeah,
Asian region as a long-term strategy to ensure access to oil reserves. And we need to move away from oil rapidly again to address the climate issue. And the genocide in Palestine has contributed more CO2 emissions in a year than I think like 200 sovereign nations. And so a lot of these things are interlinked with one another. There's a lot of sectionality of these issues. And so,
yeah,
yes, ending the genocide in Palestine is both the morally correct thing to do, but again, going back to because a lot of times people, when they're struggling, the moral argument does not resonate as much as a monetary one. If we stopped funding this genocide, that would be $4.4 billion a year to the American taxpayers to pay for things such as education and healthcare and housing and tackling the affordability crisis.
yeah, services, public services.
Public services, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for answering all my questions.
Of course. Absolutely.
Have a nice day.
You too. Take care, Lorena. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.